this show, I came up with this kind of goofy title, Always Trust Your Kate, because I listened to a lot of these old singer-songwriters in my studio, and I used to live in Nashville. I'm kind of part of that culture for a while, and Guy Clark is one of my favorite writers, and I was just listening to this song, and I thought, that's what it feels like to do abstract art. Every time I started painting, I feel like I'm just leaping off a roof, and that's what this song is about. I mean, the verse is, he's one of those who knows that life is just a leap of faith. Spread your arms, hold your breath, always trust your Kate. It's about this little boy who jumps off the garage roof, and then it traces the life of this guy until he ends up as an old man in the nursing home, but he's still got his cape, and he's still making waves. So, I don't know, that song just resonated with me, and if you're interested, just, Google it and watch it YouTube. You might enjoy it too. My favorite recording is by Patty Griffin, and it's on the tribute album to Guy Clark called This One's for Him. So, always trust your Kate. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about some of the roofs I jumped off trying to create these paintings. And starting abstract painting, I was talking with Miriam about this before we started. Starting an abstract painting is really hard because you don't have anything you're referring to. It just has to come from you. And sometimes you're not in such a good place to start. I usually have a color palette in mind. I may have a feeling like I want something to be soft and richly textured, or I want something to have a lot of motion. But other than that, I just don't really know what to do. Sometimes I start with just automatic drawing and I just mess up the canvas so that I have something to respond to. I look at the work of a lot of other artists, and some of it I've just absorbed, and sometimes I'll look for inspiration in a specific painting. And so one example is I was looking a lot at the work of an artist named Paul Feiler, who you may be familiar with. I think he died in 2013. He's relatively contemporary, but his most productive periods were in the 70s and 80s, and he did a lot of abstract work that was very neutral in tone, with lots of geometric shapes and browns and dark blues. So I started doing one, and this is sort of what it looked like, one of these big ones, where I had all these geometric shapes and lines and dark colors and neutral colors, and I really worked on it for a very long time. But this wasn't me. It just got me started. I hated it, actually. It kept working and working. And then I turned it on its head, and this is what I turned it into. So all that crazy stuff just got me started, but you can see some history here. You can see some of the circles and lines that are on there. So that you're just kind of building this rich texture to work up with that way of starting. That's one way to start. Another thing I tried with this series is that I actually started using stencils to start some of the things that I did on boards. All of the things that are the smaller works on boards were started with stencils. And but the very first one I did, I did this on a board. And then I thought, what am I going to do now? I just had to start working in layers. I sanded back, I put more layers, I put a lot of glazes on, and this painting became this. where I started. And I liked it. And I liked the finish on it. And so I thought I might actually be onto something here, because I have a hard time working in series. So I just, every one of these on these smaller boards, I started with a stencil, and then I just kept putting more layers on. Sometimes I repeated a stencil on top of layers. Here's another one that I started, and some of these stencils I have, I'm kind of the stencil queen. I have quite a collection, but these I call my Martha Stewart stencils because they're intended for wall decorations and, you know, stuff like that. But they're big, so I like them. So this one I started, and I thought, oh no. Well, maybe I don't know if I can take this up to the wall, but this is where this one ended up. So, you know, that's under there somewhere, but it has a lot of other stuff, many layers on top. And just a little story about this piece is, you know, I don't usually, I don't try to convey messages with my painting other than that, you know, create a sense of beauty or interest. But this one, as I worked on it, I came up with the title of Her Bed of Roses. And part of that was because at the time I was working on this was when there was all that press about that young woman, Gabby Petito, who was missing and later discovered murdered. So that's Her Bed of Roses, and there's some, and I put some thorns in. So sometimes I have messages, usually I don't. So those are just a couple of the ways I start. I think that the process of painting for me is always a call and response. You know, I put something down, then I have to look at it and decide whether to take that further or to maybe push something back with a veil or bring some colors forward. And it's just this constant process of analyzing what I've created and then letting that go and just working for a while and then analyzing some more. Each work draws up different questions. Does it have good rhythm or most movement? Is there too much or too little of something? Is something too dominant? Is there enough value contrast? Is it interesting? Is it, you know, sometimes I feel like I'll be almost done with a piece and I think it needs a little spice. It's pretty good, but it needs something. And this is a good example of that, where I was really working on creating texture, just using acrylics. But in the end, I thought it just needs something. It needs something, so I put these, I like stripes, I put some more saturated color in stripes on it. So I do that sometimes also. And to please myself, that's the ultimate goal, is if it doesn't please me, if I find it boring, nobody else is going to like it either. I think a few things that are consistent across my work is that I do lots and lots of layers. I mean, every one of these paintings has countless layers, and then some of them I sand back, some of them I scrape, or I just keep adding contrasting layers of opaque or transparent glazes, and that's how I get there. I also try to leave a little history of what was on the previous layers, like in this painting. These are earlier marked, right? This one, kind of surprising little bits of red. Those were on the previous layer. So I like to leave history of how I developed the painting. I like texture a lot. I've used a lot of tools to create texture. I like veiling to create these kind of subtle shifts in color by veiling another color over.
Where's an example of that?
Well, I would call this a veil.
Okay.
It's kind of a semi-sheer veil. It's kind of the process. I brought some things to show you that I used in some of these works, just for fun and because people like to see stuff like that. Some of the tools I use a lot. I have a rotary sander. I didn't bring the old sander, but you get the idea. I like foam rollers a lot, which is a great, I probably used a foam roller here. It's a great way to get a really soft veil across something rather than a brush. I use, this is called a color shaper. It's just a silicone thing. But I use that a lot, and it's great to create textures like this one, where you just kind of drag some kind of thick paint across something that's got some texture, and it just leaves a trail, a broken trail, I guess, is what I like about it. I don't paint that much with brushes because I like the texture that other tools create, but I do use brushes. I like sprayers too. Good way to spray paint around. Well, stencils I mentioned. I love stencils. They're just so much fun. And why not? You know, you put them down and you put some patterns across them and lift them up, and wow, what you get. So I've got, as I said, a lot of stencils. And I brought a few of my favorite paints. I like this iridescent bronze. You can see how you get all these different effects when you pull it across a more opaque, solid paint. And this is one of my favorites. It's called micaceous iron oxide. It has little bits of mica in it. And when you put it on thick, you get not only a almost black, but not quite black color, but you get this little bit of shininess and a gritty texture, so that when you sand back, you can reveal that. And that's how a lot of this has a lot of that paint on it. You can see the texture when you sand back into it. And I started using these. These are called high flow acrylics by Golden, and they're acrylic paints that act a little bit like watercolor, but not exactly. They follow wherever the moisture is, so they make these wonderful patterns. This is just a little sample I did in high flow, and this is watercolor. So they really behave quite differently than watercolor, and they make wonderful sheer glazes when mixed with acrylic mediums. So a lot of these, especially the panels and the ones over there that have a lot of transparency, have a lot of mixes that I did with these kinds of pigments. And then for texture, there's this stuff called molding paste. And you'll see it on, well, this one is obvious. I'll sometimes put that on a panel before I even start, and then you can press things into it to create texture. That one, and the one that Goody's standing in front of, actually pulled some of this stuff, this molding paste, through a stencil to create those raised lines. And this has a lot of it on, just kind of this one right here. It's spread on and then sanded back and then spread on again. These are fabulous. Okay, so I started experimenting with this material that use tissue paper and very fluid paints. and then you paint on it with a medium, and you can create these sheer hand-painted papers to use for collage effects. You can't buy this stuff, you have to make it with Feiler. So I've used that on, well, it's on the bed of roses, and it's also on the piece that's in the gratitude show around the corner. But they're just really fun to work with, and again, they're a great way to create a veil across something. And unlike just painting directly on a painting, you know, I can tear this up and then try it on different parts of the painting before committing.
What kind of paper is that?
It's a kind of tissue paper, and then I've brought a piece to show you. You put it on a piece of plastic, and paint on it, and then you put this acrylic medium on it that sort of plasticizes everything. And I didn't pull this one apart because I wanted to show you how it works. And then you just, after it's dry, you pull it off the plastic, and you have, basically you created a plastic paper, but you can put stencils on it, you can paint in it, you can paint on it. Some of these high flow acrylics are really fun. I think that's what's in this one. That's my new thing. I've got about 1 million of these made. It's a big mess. But this has some iridescence in it. Should be fun to work with. And I've also, after we're done talking, if any of you are interested, I brought books by some of the artists I'm really following right now, because I do look at the work of other artists all the time. So this is Ann Moore, who's a printer. Cecil Touchon, who is a Santa Fe artist, but he does this really interesting asemic writing art. Robert Sott does both painting and collage, and Sam Locke does these fabulous paintings of, they're just gorgeous, and I wish I could do paintings like him. He's my current idol. But he uses he uses oil paints, and he has a big studio, and he uses blow torches. So some of the one next to Ross here, I really tried to mimic some of his effects in acrylic. But, you know, I can't use a blowtorch in my studio, and I don't work in acrylic because in oil because I don't have ventilation. But you'll see some of his influence. I think one of the things that people say when you start making littler and littler changes, where